Hello, this is my review of Fleetwood, my life and adventures in Fleetwood Mac. And this is my first Mick Fleetwood book. I am a drummer, as you know. I've been reading drum books along with all kinds of other books, but lately I bought a whole bunch of drum books. And this was less of a Mick biography than what the title implies, a his adventures in Fleetwood Mac. It was a lot about the band. So part two starts at page 139, and I'm going to tell you how to read this thing because it's too long. I actually bought a second book that's later in his career, I think, and it's also about him, but it's not here yet, so I would peruse it just to see. This total of 284 pages, and the way it goes is like this. The intro was brilliant, and then it goes to the part one of Fleetwood Mac's career, which is basically until they got Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham in there. And I mean, unless you lived that era of the 60s and you want to read a lot of that stuff and have a nostalgia trip, you probably don't need to read most of it. The other problem I had with it was after the intro, you could tell that Mick was speaking in the intro. Then it shifted to somebody else talking. I'm going, why does it feel different all of a sudden? And then I looked at the cover with Stephen Davis. This guy was talking, and it was a lot of name dropping, band name dropping and people that they hung around with and stuff. And I frankly just got bored. It was like a laundry list of how cool the guy was. But then in part two, it starts talking about the modern era of Fleetwood Mac. And again, it wasn't about him per se, hardly anything about his drums, which is kind of surprising. It's more, well, let me go this way. The book of Billy Joel's drummer had a lot to do with drums. John Mellencamp's drummer had a lot to do with drums. This, not so much. There was one chapter that said something about a boy and his drum, and that was brilliant. I think it might have been chapter one, the intro. But after that, hardly anything else about drums. He didn't talk about the equipment he plays or who inspired him as a drummer, none of this stuff. And frankly, as far as I can tell, he's not really that deep into musicianship, I would say. He just plays. That's part of what he is, but most of it, he's a band member. He's in a band. And the other part of this is he's a freaking hot mess. He's pretty much nuts. His relationship problems that he had are just, they're ridiculous. And, running around on his wife multiple times, getting back with her like 2, 3 times, getting some other guy's wife and stealing her, going with Stevie Nicks when Lindsey was with her, and just all over the place. The guy is out of control, or was out of control. He probably still is. Seemed like his whole life just out of control. Lost all his money, and from a pure interest of learning about him as a drummer, I'm not really that satisfied with this book. And I probably shouldn't be surprised. He's a good song drummer, but he doesn't seem to really care about a lot of intricacies of the drums per se. He just seems to play rhythms, and he did talk about going to Africa and stuff later on, and doing some interesting things that were drum related in groups over there and stuff. But that was more like a fancy vacation, it seems like, than being deeply into the instrument. I mean, I could be maybe incorrect about that. Maybe I'm being too harsh. That's just my impression. But from a drummer's perspective, I highly like Billy Joel's drummer book better, Liberty DeVito, and John Mellencamp's drummer. and his name is slipping my head right now. I know it very well, and I can't think of it. So anyway, I'm going down the road here in the future. I've got Joey Kramer. I've got the Ghost Rider book from Neil Peart, Buddy Rich, Carmine Appice, the Stuart Copeland book, Ed Shaughnessy. Let's see what else I got. I've got Phil Collins, Bernard Purdy, and what is this one? Oh, Herman Ribble of the Scorpions. And I'm, like I said, I'm waiting still one more Fleetwood Mac. Well, hopefully it's more about him than Fleetwood Mac. There's a lot of the Fleetwood Mac stories are kind of out there in the public, and you already know them. There was more information about the breakup of the band with Lindsey before he came back, the other time, because this book kind of cuts off right after, well, he did the Zoo, and then they reformed and they did Tango in the Night, and then it was pretty much that was the end of this book time frame. And I'm thinking that maybe the other book might be a little more modern and kind of fill in some later gaps, whether it's necessary or not. I hope it's more about drums than Fleetwood Mac, because you can learn about band history more or less from just reading the internet and watching YouTube. This wasn't really a drummer's book, so it kind of deflated me a little bit. It's still okay. It's good. If you want Fleetwood Mac history, it's worth reading. But I mean, if you're going to do that, you probably need every band member and their impression of what happened instead of just his. So in that regard, you're going to be reading a lot more about them than you would if you were just trying to read about a drummer.